Welcome back, and in this lesson we're going to be looking at animations with jQuery. So this is going to be a lot of fun because jQuery does animations really well. So first of all, let's update some of our HTML here, output 1. And I need several different containers, but I also wanted to create several different buttons so that we can have divs and give it a class of btn. And we'll have some click me buttons. So click me 1, and I'll create several of them. So we've got click me 1, click me 2, and click me 3. And we're not going to give them any IDs just to make it a little bit more challenging for us, so that when we attach these button click events, let's distinguish between which one actually got clicked. So we're going to do a check on which one got clicked to make it more difficult. So we've got a bunch of click me buttons. Also want to update and have maybe a few different output areas. So let's do ID, and these ones we're going to make it easy. We'll just have them as ID outputs. So hello world, and we're going to grab some of the stuff that we have here, and let's move this one up as well. So this will be output, and we'll rename them so that they are in order. So this one can be output 4. That one can be output 3. That one can be output 2. That one can be output 1. And then we've got our buttons up here at the top. So let's also add in some inputs there. We'll actually do ID, and this one will be output 5. And the reason I want so many sections is because we're going to be making these buttons do a whole lot of work. They're going to be doing some pretty cool stuff, and I want to have lots of elements that I can select and apply these things to. So that should be pretty good. And now we can just update to lesson 40. And let's flip back to our JS, hide that, and we're ready to go. So let's see what our index page looks like now. So we've got a ton of stuff happening on there. We've got a bunch of images and just a really messy page with a bunch of ready to use elements that we can start doing some stuff with. So first of all, let's create a button. So the button class, and I want to click on that button, and then I want to fire off the function. And the problem initially is that we don't know which button is which. Another thing here is that we need these buttons to actually have some CSS. So let's first do the CSS. So this way we can apply some CSS. So do border solid black, separated out padding 10 pixels. So see what this looks like. Just do a quick refresh. So it looks a little bit better like buttons. Let's clean this up, tidy this up a bit, so it's easier to read. Also, maybe we want to add, we've got some padding there, so maybe we want to do a width. So set a default width. So maybe we only want them to be 150 wide. So that should be pretty good. So we've got something that looks like buttons there, and we're ready to apply some click functions. So it's a good thing that we do have a lot of elements here to select from, because we can start applying different values to those elements, different methods. So let's first show you how you can grab the index value. So remember, again, this gets put in an array format. So we want to know which one actually got clicked. So we're going to do this, and let's do index. So we get the current index of the element that got clicked, and we don't need that one in there. So let's try this out and see what happens. Let's open our console a little bit bigger there. So 1, 2, 3. So it's actually getting the value of the elements. So we've got 1, 2, 3. So it's not in an array format. It's just getting those index values. So if we want to get the actual index in the array, then we'd have to subtract 1 off of it. But we can use this value because we can do a condition that if this index equals 1, then let's fire off something to happen here. So what do we want to do? We want to grab, so we've got a bunch of these output 1. So let's make something happen to output 1. And I did promise that we're going to do some animations. So let's do our first animation. And animations are actually really super easy. Oh, I forgot the hash there at the beginning. So let's try this. So click, and we can see that it slides up. So that was just a little one there. Maybe we'll do the bigger one because that effect, and that's why it's good that we've got several to choose from. So let's, we can shrink this down. So when we click 1, we're going to select output 2, and so that we're going to select this one here, and watch what happens. So basically, we've grabbed output 2 and it's gone to display none. So let's try that again, and let's grab output 2 and watch what happens when we click it. So this is the slide up function. So we see there's a bunch of values that show up there. So we can actually control the speed as well. So if we want to do it a little bit slower, because that was hard to watch, we see that the height is adjusting. It's going all the way, and jQuery is doing all of this until it hits 0. And then when it does hit 0, it just does display none. So basically what's happening is we see it's moving up and it's hiding bit by bit by bit. The height is shrinking until it disappears. So that's what slide up does. And we also have another one to slide it back down. So what goes up must come down. Not always the case, but in this case, we can do this with jQuery. So let's do slide down. And this time, let's check to see if it's button 2, and the slide down is going to make it quicker. So this is in milliseconds. So 1,000 milliseconds is 1 second. 5,000 milliseconds is 5 seconds. So first, let's hide that one. So that's the slow pace one. You see it's hiding there. And then when we click this one, we reveal it again. And then it just simply removes that style as well. So essentially it does the exact opposite. And let's do one more here, and we're going to check to see if the value of the button is 3. And if it is, this time we're not going to slide up or down, but we've got a third option, and that's toggle. And what toggle does is it will, so this one is slide toggle, and let's set it to 1,000. So there we go. So we can hide and show and toggle. Once we show it, we can always slide it up with toggle, or we could use the click me one. So what I want you to do now is try this out for yourself and see what you can make happen. And there's one other thing as well. So we can do a numeric value, and we also have some word values here. So we can do slow. So slow, I believe, defaults to 1 second. So it's the same thing, or actually slow is actually a little bit quicker. So when we click it a bunch of times, there we go. So we're toggling it up and down. Let's try fast. Refresh. So that's even faster. So you've got a few options there. If you want to, you can select the toggle speed, slow, fast, or you can set it in milliseconds. Usually I choose the milliseconds option because this gives me more control, more precise information about how quickly or how slowly I'm doing the toggle. So go ahead and try this out for yourself. And in the next lesson, we'll continue to work on animations. I'll show you some even more cool things you can do with jQuery. This was just the beginning. Hey, and welcome back. And I hope you had some fun with the slide option in jQuery. And you can even set even more things with slide. You've got ability to have a function that fires off once the slide is complete. So I just want to show you that. And this is the same thing that we can do for fade as well, which we are going to be looking at in this lesson. So basically, you can fire these off and it can say slide up ready. So let's go back into our editor. I'll check that out. So we've attached it to this one, and we can see that what's going to happen once the slide up is completed, then we fire off that function. So that's another option within the sliding where you can do quite a bit more. And you've got some more controls as well. We are going to get more into detail in the options later on as we take a closer look at animate. So for this lesson, I want to show you that we've got another option. And so slide basically plays with the height and adjusts the height of the element. And we've got another one that's called fade. So fade is similar. Let's fade in. We've got fade in, fade out, and of course fade toggle. So let's quickly adjust these. So this is fade out, and then this is fade toggle. So I'll do them all at once, and then we'll open up our viewer and we'll take a closer look at them. So same options that we saw with the jQuery, with slide. So we're just going to update this to fade up, or it shouldn't be fade up, it should be fade in. So fade in ready. Let's shrink this down, refresh, and try it out. So we've saved this as lesson 41. So this is the next lesson after slide. So let's try that out. So fade in ready, and we don't see anything happening to the output because it's already faded in. So it's a good thing that we had that function there that fires off. Otherwise, it wouldn't be doing anything or anything visible. Next, let's try the fade out. So this is the one that adjusts the opacity. So we'll fade that back in, and you can see that as the element's coming in, we see the opacity is increasing all the way to 1. When it gets to 1, it simply removes that out of the style, and there we go. So that the opposite, fading it out and then fading it in. And then fade toggle, just like the slide toggle, what do you think it does? If you click it, it shifts it to the opposite. So if it's faded out, it'll fade it in. If it's faded in, it'll fade it out. So that's what it does. And we've got it on fast, so that's why it was super fast, but essentially doing the same thing that these other ones were, just giving us the ability for that toggle effect. So we also have one more as well. And just important to note here that we can adjust the speed. And as mentioned before, I usually like to use the millisecond version of it, just because I feel I've got more control. Fast and slow, they do have defaults, and sometimes it might be easier to do that. But usually I just default to the millisecond values because I can be more accurate with that as well. So either one, whatever your preference is, you can use either the string values or the numeric values. And then also they can all do this functions that can fire off when it's completed. And as mentioned, there is one more. So we'll get the fade in, we'll get rid of that one. And we're gonna, instead of fade in, let's apply it to that same element. And this time we're going to do fade to. So what fade to does is, just like brackets has that little pop-up here. So we have a duration, so that's a number. Opacity is going to be a number. And then we have an option to fire off a function when we're complete. So that's this last one here. So when it's completed, we can fire off and we can do something, just like what we did with the fade in over here. So let's set a value. So let's set 1000 milliseconds. And now we need to set the value or the opacity where we want it to stop at. So we're going to fade it to 0.5. So that is 50% opacity or 50% see-through. And we can fire off a function and we can say, we'll console log this one as well. And of course, you have options. You can do whatever you want in these functions whenever they finish the fading. So you're open to add in whatever you want in these functions to do all kinds of creative and cool things as needed. So faded to 50%. So let's try that and see what happens. So now we've updated it. We've got a message coming on the console, and let's watch what happens over here. And we can see that it fades to 50%. When it completes, it fires off the function faded to 50%, and we can see that the style opacity property is still there. So it's unlike when we do the fade out, where it still has the opacity of 50%, but the display none. So it's not actually working together, which is also very interesting because it is adjusting the opacity, but it's keeping it at that 50%. So that's another thing to keep in mind. And of course, if you're toggling it, you're only going to be able to toggle it to 50% because now we've done the fade to 50%. And if we want to bring it back to 100, we'd need another button or another function to fire off in order to bring that opacity back up to 1. So opacity, and the other one is that it's doing the display value. So either display none or it's just completely removing that out. So that's what that function does. So now it's up to you. Open up your editor, try it out for yourself. Again, have some fun with it. You can use that HTML index page that we've created. There's a lot of elements on here and you can grab them, fade them, and just do something really cool with them. And remember, if you are attaching it to, let's say you're attaching it to these highlight elements, there's a big problem if you're fading it, just as we saw with the slide. So let me show you what actually happens here. So this is just something to watch out for and to keep in mind when you are doing these fades. So if I do something like highlight, and if I do click, and we'll fire off our function. So this time I'm going to do this, fade it out. So dot fade out. And we don't have to set a value, so we're just going to keep it at that. So what do you think is wrong with this statement here? So this is a quick quiz question. What is wrong with highlight, click, fade out? What do you think is going to go wrong here? It's going to go wrong if you want to bring these elements back. So you have no way, because you're applying that display value to those elements, and you can see that when you go back into the source and let me do an inspect on it. You can see that once they're display none, you can't actually see them, so you can't click them. So that's the problem there. So keep that in mind when you're using this and fade out, because sometimes you don't want to just hide it, you want a way to bring it back to that state.